Did you know there's no such thing as a normal headache? Headaches need a diagnosis. Our doctors can help. Welcome to the Heads Up podcast, brought to you by the National Migraine Centre, the only UK charity treating migraine and headache.
Hello, today it's me, Dr. Jessica Briscoe, and I'm joined by Dr. Katy Munro.
Hello there.
And welcome to the Heads Up podcast. So today we're going to be talking about prevention. So prevention of migraine attacks. Really, we want to know about why people would want to use a preventer. Well, I mean, obviously they want to stop an attack, but when do you decide that you're going to use it? So ideally it's to try and reduce the number of acute attacks you're having and reduce the amount of medication you're using to manage those attacks. It also can help to reduce the impact of migraine on your day-to-day life, so the disability, which we talk about quite a lot actually, and essentially quieten the brain down, so stop that overactivity from the nervous system. So when would you start a preventer?
I tend to talk to people about basics of prevention right at the very start in terms of non-tablet ones, because I think a lot of people don't really want to take medication. So I'll come back to that question if I can.
A bit previous with my question.
Yes, you've sped ahead of me there. So I would normally just start banging on relentlessly about lifestyle changes that people can make. So we say to people, do you eat regularly? And almost invariably they would say yes. So I tend to say to them, exactly when do you eat? And just make sure they realise that having something every 3 to 4 hours and maybe a bedtime snack is very important. And we know that the brain likes routine, so routine in sleep times, and then I think on a previous episode we've talked about exercise and how helpful that can be.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're actually particularly good at asking about specific timings, and actually with the sleep time and the eating times are quite linked, don't you think? So
yeah.
I mean, if you're actually someone who has a very early dinner, so say at about 6 o'clock, and you won't necessarily have anything before you go to bed, and then you wake up at 6 a.m, that's 12 hours of not doing it. So it is actually quite important to think about that sort of thing.
Yes, definitely. So routine, trying to keep into regular eating, sleeping times, doing exercise regularly. And then a lot of people have tried supplements for things or heard that there might be. So there are various supplements that we know have had some study evidence. The one I really like, and again, we've talked a little bit about this already, is magnesium.
Yeah.
So they studied the citrate form of magnesium, but there are loads of different ones. It's a bit confusing, actually.
Yeah, and they're not all equal. So magnesium citrate is fairly well absorbed. We actually often advise malate because that's quite well tolerated, and it is used for other related conditions. So fibromyalgia we use magnesium malate a lot for, and that one, and there is another form called it's glycerate. That's
glycinate, yes, the glycinate form. And so it doesn't really matter what the whole key to it is that it's one that is bioavailable, so, and also needs to be pretty high dose, and that is where we run into problems sometimes. So when you're taking a high dose of magnesium by mouth, some people get quite an upset tummy, and I do like to warn them about that.
Yeah, so stomach pains and the laxative effect of the
yeah,
two.
So start low and creep it up gently, but then you do need to take it for at least 3 months if you're going to see if it's working.
Yeah, and then the next thing that I actually think works quite well with magnesium, and there's very good evidence for, is riboflavin, vitamin B2, as someone once said to me, the thing that's in Rice Krispies. So it's a B vitamin. A lot of people say to me, oh, I already take a multivitamin, a multi-B vitamin. It's not a high enough dose in vitamin B complex, so you want to be taking 400 milligrams daily. And the main side effect with that one seems to be that it turns people's urine more yellow.
Yep.
And also some people have actually a bit of gastritis, a little stomach upset as well with that one. So just a few things to look out for.
And again, the mantra, you need to keep trying it for at least 3 months at high dose. All of these things are pretty safe, but if you had any problems with your kidneys, or if you have other medications or medical conditions, you're not sure whether these are safe for you, obviously just check it out with your doctor or with us. Coenzyme Q10 is the other one that has some study evidence, and that I think the studies were 100 milligrams 3 times a day, which most people find 3 times a day is quite hard to remember to do. It's quite expensive too, isn't it?
It is the one that is more expensive, I have to say. It can be effective, though.
But it can be helpful, and you can take 1 or 2 or 3 of these all together.
Yeah.
And that I don't think there's any real studies to show whether that's more helpful to do 1 or 2 of them or all 3 in one great gulp in the morning. So
there are other supplements that are available, and I know a lot of people talk about feverfew and butterbear.
Yes.
We actually don't advise to take those ones because they don't have evidence to back them up, and actually feverfew can cause some liver problems,
and butterbear I think, and feverfew I think can cause mouth ulcers too. But the problem with any herbal products is the variability of the strength, so we tend to steer people away from those. But I know that some people have tried them, but we probably would say be cautious.
And then there's acupuncture as well. Now there is actually evidence for acupuncture being helpful to prevent migraine. In the studies, people had to have it quite frequently, which can get quite expensive. And I also think it's important to point out that acupuncture is very practitioner dependent, so it really varies according who's giving it.
That's a really good phrase. I completely agree. You need to find somebody who is experienced at doing acupuncture and who's probably recommended, or the British Association of Acupuncturists is a good source of information about acupuncturists. But there, as you said, Jess, there is some evidence that it helps some people. But I think like everything we talk about in migraine prevention, we can't look at you and know that that's going to suit you. And nothing works for everybody.
Absolutely. It's not a one size fits all.
Definitely not.
So there are some other things. So we talk about this a lot, stress reduction techniques. So practicing mindfulness, exercising, so particularly with yoga, can be very helpful. Having massage can really help. Actually, often during, some people when they're having shoulder pain during an attack, other sort of relaxing exercises like Tai Chi can be helpful.
And just physical things like ice packs or heat packs. That can help. Sometimes people like to prevent an attack coming on by using those physical things. Stretching, maybe some posture exercises like Pilates, lots of other things out there. So I think it's a really good idea to look at what you're doing in general to try and reduce the irritability of the brain so that your migraine attacks are not coming quite so frequently. It changes the threshold for attack. It makes it a little bit further away. What about diets? I know you're keen on talking about nutrition, Jess.
I am quite keen, actually. So there has been a lot of people come and ask about keto diets or low carb diets. Actually, fairly recently, there has been some good evidence. I heard about it in a conference not that long ago about very low carb diets and keto diets and the fact that they have been shown to be beneficial in migraine. And I was actually quite sceptical before that. I've always advised on low carb diets, as I know you have too.
Yes, yeah.
Because actually if you think about the way maintaining a steady state blood sugar level, stopping too much of that variation, carbohydrates are a sugar, they naturally cause more variability.
More peaks and troughs of your blood sugar, don't they?
Yeah. So but it's actually nice to see that there is some evidence that we were right.
Yes. Are there any diets you warn people away from?
I do warn people away from the thing I warn people about with keto diet is the side effects, I have to say. So some people don't get on that well, especially women, I find don't get on well with it, and it's very difficult if you are vegan. I think diets that I tend to warn people away from are anything that's too restrictive. So things where they say to cut out huge food groups, sort of saying go completely gluten-free or dairy-free without having any evidence of being intolerant to these things, if they've always tolerated them quite well. There isn't particularly evidence that those specific food types will cause migraines.
Yeah, I think that's right. We do see quite a lot of patients who've cut out this and cut out that and cut out the other and end up with really quite restrictive diets. So just to be careful about that, I think. But the other type of diet that seems to be really quite trendy at the moment is the intermittent fasting or the 5-2 diets. So some people are doing this intermittent fasting where I think they have to not eat anything for 16 hours. I would put a big red warning flag above those diets for migraine patients, wouldn't you?
Specifically for migraine patients, because as I said, you need a more steady state blood sugar level. If you're having huge gaps of time between eating, that is likely to trigger migraines for people.
And the 5-2 is a similar sort of principle where you have very low calorie intake. I think it's about 600 calories on 2 days a week. Is that right? Yeah, and then
very low.
5 days a week, you kind of eat whatever you fancy. Is that the general principle?
Pretty
I think,
much,
isn't it?
It's
but I just feel that's a little bit tricky for people who are having a lot of migraine, that they may well irritate the brain a bit too much with those kind of diets.
What about things like, there was a lot about a few years ago about daith piercings?
I know, if you look on social media, there's loads of people who've tried these. So this is a piercing that you have in your ear. It's a specific place in your ear. And we have a lot of people who have tried it or ask us about it. And we do have to be a bit cautious because nobody's actually done any studies to see if it's a true thing. And a lot of things work because people believe that it will do them good. And this is an effect called placebo effect. So does that matter if it is placebo effect?
I don't think it necessarily matters. I'd be very wary about spending a lot of money on a daith piercing because I think that can be a risk. I think there's absolutely no problem with people trying it, because especially if you want a nice piercing and it might work.
If you want a piercing, well, why not? But there are certainly lots of anecdotes, but as somebody once said, and I can't remember who it was, the plural of anecdote is not evidence. So just because it worked for one or two people doesn't necessarily mean that it's an evidence-based treatment. And there are people out there very happy to take your money.
Yeah. So there are a few other things that have been out there recently, hasn't there?
There was some wacky things we came across the other day. Burning buffalo hair. Do not try this at home. I have no idea why anybody would think that would stop a migraine.
So what do they do with the buffalo hair?
I have no idea. Do you have a handy buffalo we could try it?
Absolutely not.
No, nor me. There also, somebody commented that the cause of somebody's migraine might be all the men that were surrounding them, but I really don't think we can blame all men for causing migraine. So let's just ignore those wacky ones. I think the message really is, if it sounds a bit wacky, it probably is a bit wacky.
I think so.
So maybe check it out on some sites like our website or the Migraine Trust website, where there's a lot of actual proper information.
So next time we'll be talking a bit more about medical interventions for the prevention of migraine, as I try to jump forward a bit too early at the beginning, didn't I, Katy?
Yes, I'm going to save all that information for next time. So just to make sure that we do have a next episode, we just wanted to remind you that we are a charity and we do rely on your donations to keep us open, able to see patients and to do this podcast. We also got some exciting guests coming in the next series and we really need some good equipment. So if you could just donate £1 or £2 via our Virgin Giving link, that can be found on the blurb, or just go to Virgin Giving and type in Heads Up Podcast. Show us some love. That's brilliant if you could do that. Thank you. Charlotte and Swati spoke to a couple of our patients about the kind of lifestyle changes they'd made and what difference this made to the frequency and the impact of their migraines.
Thank you, Charlotte, so much for joining us on our podcast.
You're welcome.
So I know migraines have sort of impacted your life a lot. So I first wanted to just ask you a bit about how migraines have affected you.
Yeah, so I've had migraines since I was about 4.5. They used to affect me every Monday afternoon, mainly, while I was at school. So I'd never really spent Monday afternoons at school. It was like to the point where I'd go completely white. I'd be violently ill. And I'd end up getting sent home and going and lying in a dark room with an ice pack on my head, taking kind of like ibuprofen and Calpol when I was that young, just to try and get the pain to go away. And then as I've got older, they kind of switched days to like midweek, so Wednesday. And I thought, maybe it's because I'm doing too much exercise during the start of the week and not kind of fueling my body in the right way.
Yeah.
But as I've grown up, I've realized no matter what I do, I will end up with migraine in some form, whether it be just like a mild one where I can still carry on with my day but be in quite a bit of pain, or be so severe that I'm stuck in bed for like 5 days. And I've realized that I can't kind of go on technology as much as I used to. So I can't spend like 8 hours a day sat at a desk on a screen because it hurts my eyes, and glasses aren't strong enough to kind of help eradicate my migraines.
I understand that you sort of have made some changes to your lifestyle, which has actually had sort of an impact on your migraines, you know, improved them a bit.
Yeah. So instead of like working in an office and stuff, I've realized that that's not okay for my body, and that I need to be kind of be around people more and outside more to make sure that I don't get them.
And when it comes to sort of diet, have you made any changes with your diet, and has that helped at all? Or
so I kind of cut out carbs as much as I can. I obviously still have some, because almost everything in the supermarket nowadays contains some form of carbohydrate. So I've kind of cut down as much as I can. Like, I don't eat bread. I don't really eat kind of like snacky carbs like crisps or anything like that, as it's just too much, and my body becomes very kind of bloated, and I notice afterwards I start to feel very groggy, and therefore a migraine shortly after kind of starts. I've tried to introduce more kind of low carb things, so like alternatives to bread, so I'm still getting the satisfaction of eating something that I like pizza, but in a low carb form, by using like cauliflower crust, or just like low carb mini cheese based crust, so it's higher in your fat and your protein than it is in your carb.
And has that kind of thing helped?
It has helped a lot. Like, in the kind of last 3 months, I've only had 5 major migraines where they've lasted more than 2 days. And I only have maybe 1 or 2 a week now, kind of migraines in general, which for me is amazing, because it got to a point where I was having them like every day.
Oh God.
So yeah, it has helped a lot. It was surprising to begin with. Like, I really didn't want to kind of cut out the food that I liked, because I kind of use food as a comfort blanket. So cutting it out was really difficult. But once you do cut it out and like notice the benefits of cutting it out, you're like, oh, okay, this is actually doing something good for my body.
Worth it in the end. Yeah. And what about things like exercise? Have you found, I know you mentioned sort of exercise almost was triggering them, but have you found it's been helpful or not?
So I don't do as much exercise as I used to. When I was at school, I played netball and hockey and rounders and stuff almost every day. And I think it was getting to the point where I didn't have enough time to adequately rest my body as well as fuel it before I started another exercise. Whereas nowadays I don't tend to do that kind of exercise anymore. I do more walks with my dogs. At work, I'm on my feet for 7 to 8 hours a day as I work in retail. When I'm on my days off, I try to do at least a 3-mile walk, just so that I'm outside, I'm getting the fresh air, my body's kind of still active, and I'm not just kind of sat not doing anything and not fueling my body.
Yeah, so it's kind of like keeping active, but without being too intense that it's actually making it worse. It's kind of getting that balance,
it's like
isn't it?
knowing your body's limit of what it can take within a certain period of time. Like I said, I would still play hockey, but for many reasons I don't. One of them being that I know the next morning I will wake up with a migraine, because my body just can't handle that much physical exertion at one point.
And what about sort of other things like sleep? Have you found like regulating sleep patterns and your sort of sleep routine? Has that helped at all with your migraines, or have you changed it?
I've always struggled sleeping. Since I was a kid, I've never been able to sleep very well. I always end up falling asleep at around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And when I was at school, I was waking up at 7 a.m. to go catch a school bus. So my body just wasn't rested well enough. Whereas now I'm older and I'm not in school, and I have kind of more time to prioritize my sleep, I guess. Whether that be, sometimes I do still fall asleep at 2 o'clock in the morning, but I'm able to sleep through till about 10 a.m.
So it's like getting the amount of sleep right.
For me, I'm quite lucky with my lifestyle and my job that I am able to kind of fall asleep later and wake up later in the day. So I'm still making sure I get at least 6 to 8 hours of sleep a night. I also try before I go to bed to kind of like turn all my electronics off, stay away from them, like read a book, or white noise to kind of help soothe me to sleep, because I find that my mind kind of keeps going some nights, and I just need something to distract my mind from going.
So sort of everyone talks about sort of, taking medication for migraine, but do you find like for people listening to this podcast that actually looking at your lifestyle and making little changes within your lifestyles would be sort of something that they should do and have a look at, and it could really improve their migraines?
I think so, yes, because for me, I've tried every kind of prescription medication that the NHS can give me, and none of them have really worked. They've either caused other issues like anxiety or panic attacks, or they made me just not feel right within myself. And so kind of my last resort, well, not last resort, it shouldn't have been the last resort, but it was for me, was changing the way I lived my life and having to sacrifice things like working in an office to kind of make it work. But if you find what works for you, just do it, whether that seems right or wrong. If changing your lifestyle works for you, do it, because in the long run, it will make you happier.
It's better than living with the pain of migraine, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not always nice changing your lifestyle because everyone gets stuck in their routine. But when everything else is kind of failing you and you don't really know what else to do, you kind of have to look at the overview of your whole life and think, okay, what is there that I could maybe not eat or not do as much anymore, like going out and drinking and staying late out, like just those kind of things. You've got to think, is the 3 hours of fun you're having worth the 5 days of pain you're gonna have afterwards?
Yeah, I know, it's not really fair, is it?
No, it's not. Yeah. I mean, I'm 22, so you would have thought I'd be kind of going out partying, drinking with my friends, but I've noticed that the money I'm spending and the pain I endure is just not worth it.
It's not worth it, yeah.
Like, I can have fun without kind of drinking and staying out late.
Yeah, and feel much better for it at the end of the day.
So much better.
Yeah. So is there anything else you sort of changed in your lifestyle, or do you think those are kind of the three main things that you've looked at?
I think they're the three main things I've looked at. I think it's just a matter of finding what's right for you and kind of sticking with it. Kind of doing it over a couple months before you give up on it, because that was one thing I always found, was that I would take like a medication for maybe 2 or 3 weeks and it just not work. Whereas when you change your lifestyle, you've got to persevere for a month, 2 months, 3 months.
Well, that's been really great. I think everyone out there is going to really enjoy hearing your experiences and maybe try it themselves and see what works for them. So thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charlotte. We recently did a poll on our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and we asked migraineurs to tell us if they've tried any diet changes or have made any dietary modifications that have helped with their migraines. We had some incredible response. Nearly 700 people voted in that poll, and 80% of them said yes, they have made changes to their diet. We had some incredible comments, some of them finding it very useful, some of them finding it not so useful. Our next patient on this podcast is Daisy Hayes. She was part of this poll, and I'm just going to call her now and speak to her about what modifications has she tried and how it's helped her.
Thank you for joining us today, Daisy. I'm just going to start off with asking you, can you tell us a bit about your migraines?
So I've had chronic migraines since I was about 7 or 8, and then when I was 17 I started having hemiplegic migraines, and then a couple of years later I got diagnosed with cluster headaches as well. So the clusters I have episodic, but my migraines are chronic still, I think.
So currently, in terms of your headaches, is it cluster headaches you get, or do you still get hemiplegic migraines?
Yeah, no, I still get hemiplegic migraines.
So you get both cluster and hemiplegic?
Yeah, I have hemiplegic migraines a lot of the time, and then I just have episodic cluster headaches once a year or so.
Oh, one.
Yes.
So, well, I know that you said yes to changing diet and modifications. Has that helped? And what modifications did you do? What dietary changes did you do?
Well, when I first went to the migraine centre, it was a few years back now, and just actually learning more about it from Dr. Munro, and I started eating more protein and like eating little and often. I try not to skip a meal, and just being a lot more aware of what I eat and how it'll affect my brain. And it definitely helped with the hemiplegic migraines, especially like just the day-to-day attack. It sort of helped keep my energies up, I think.
Perfect.
Yeah, and it wasn't even like a massive change. It was just being a lot more aware of what I actually eat. And I know, like, if I've gone a certain amount of time without eating, I can feel like an attack's starting to come, and I'll make sure to get some energy from somewhere, and rather than like just processed foods and everything. It doesn't stop it, but it does help to keep it under control, I think, if I really watch what I eat.
But thank you so much for joining us today, Daisy.
Thank you.
So our next episode is going to take this subject a bit further, and we're going to be talking about medical interventions for the prevention of migraine. Join us next time.
You've been listening to the Heads Up podcast. If you want more information or have any comments, email us on info@nationalmigrainecentre.org.uk. Till next time.